pressing issues before us at the time of a pandemic. How do we care for our families? What are the best ways to prevent infection? How do we care for someone who is infected? And how will our everyday lives be affected by this medical emergency? Over the next half hour, we'll try to provide the information every family needs to know as we work together to manage the pandemic at home.
Hello everyone, I'm Ren Scott, and welcome to this special broadcast on how to prepare for an influenza pandemic. As we'll all learn, during a pandemic, everything changes. Hospitals will be overcrowded, schools, banks, public transportation, and everyday public services will be affected. Bottom line, many aspects of our everyday lives will be forced to change. But the situation can be managed if we all simply take the time and learn what to do. So over the next half hour, we'll lay out the facts. We'll explain what a pandemic is, how it spreads, and what each of us can do to control the situation. We'll explain how to care for the sick at home, how to recognize symptoms, and how to know when it's time to seek professional medical help. We'll address the critical subject of hygiene and how it can be the single most important aspect of fighting a pandemic. And we'll lay out the emergency kit that every family should have and how to use each item in that kit. And throughout this broadcast, we'll provide important websites, phone numbers, and contact information for key organizations and personnel that can help us all get through a medical emergency. But let's begin with the obvious. What is the flu? What makes it so dangerous? The influenza virus is a respiratory virus that gets into the lungs and causes damage. The seasonal flu, for example, is most dangerous to the very young and the very old because it weakens their immune system enough to make them susceptible to secondary infections. But this 1-2 punch, it can be fatal.
We know about seasonal flu and the typical symptoms you see, fever, runny nose, etc. But there are different strains of flu which even can cause an eye infection, and that's the only symptom you get. So we're really not sure what the next strain will be, or the pandemic strain, or even what the symptoms will be. So we need to be prepared for whatever happens.
Now, most people have a natural or acquired ability to resist the seasonal flu, but when a pandemic flu strikes, it will be a novel strain with likely no natural resistance, and a vaccine, it could be potentially months in the making. Preparation is key for containing a pandemic because when it hits, it has the potential to affect every single person on Earth. Simply put, a pandemic is an epidemic that is happening everywhere. And the last time a killer influenza like this struck was less than 90 years ago.
A true pandemic is defined in 3 parts. It's a unique or one-of-a-kind virus, something the body has no natural immunity to. It's easily transmissible and very aggressive, and pandemics are cyclical.
Scientifically, we've seen pandemics occur every 8 to 50 years. And, you know, with modes of transportation and the close proximity in which we live today, you've got people in mega cities living on top of each other. The time is right. We actually are overdue right now for a pandemic, so it's something to be very concerned about.
The most devastating pandemic in recorded history was the Spanish flu of 1918. More people died of the flu in those 2 years than were killed in World War I. An estimated 675,000 Americans died of influenza during that time.
The Spanish flu, or the 1918 pandemic, was the benchmark that we measure pandemics by. It was an extremely serious pandemic, caused millions of deaths worldwide, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of deaths in the United States, and lasted through the better part of really 2 years, 1918 and 1990, before it subsided.
Unlike the seasonal flu, which is most dangerous to the very old and the very young, pandemic flu, like the Spanish flu of 1918, kills many healthy people between the ages of 20 and 40.
The reason why is because our immune systems actually are developed, and most of the morbidity or the poor outcomes with pandemic influenza are a result of our healthy immune system. It basically attacks everything, and as a part of that inflammation, and attacking of the white blood cells, we actually become overwhelmed. It attacks our organs and our lungs, and it kind of defeats the purpose by trying to get rid of this virus for us.
Even with all the advances in modern medicine, the threat of another major flu pandemic in this day and age is very real. And while in time, advanced science would surely develop a vaccine to fight this new virus strain, the process would take months. And during that time, knowing how this virus spreads and how to care for your family could mean the difference between life and death.
It is a scary situation. What I tell people is it will happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And the other thing I tell them is the clock is ticking. We just don't know what time it is.
Now that we understand what we're facing, we need to start to understand how to deal with a pandemic and how it will affect every aspect of our daily lives. While a pandemic may be a complicated medical problem, managing it can actually come down to basic cooperation and common sense.
It may be hard for the average person to comprehend, but should a pandemic strike, it will affect every aspect of normal everyday life, from hospitals to schools, to grocery stores to churches. Normal will cease to exist.
Every single thing will be disrupted. There won't be an aspect of life that will not be disrupted, and disruption will be the mildest symptoms society-wise.
During a pandemic, up to 30% of the world population will be sick at any one time, and that includes doctors and other medical personnel. That means hospitals will be overwhelmed and understaffed. Schools will close, and students will be forced to stay home. Public transportation could be severely slowed or even stopped. Food and other products will not be delivered, leaving store shelves bare. To get through it, everyone will need to prepare. You'll need to think ahead.
If it gets to a certain point, the community leaders may decide that we need to do things like close schools. So you're going to need to have a backup plan as to what are you going to do with your children if you still have to work. You're going to need to have supplies on hand at home.
The experts agree now is the time to make your plans. On the home front, it means thinking about your family routine and the ways your family will be affected. For business owners, managers, and professionals, it means putting your health and your employees' health before your business.
American society, the American business community is based on, doing whatever it takes, including coming to work if you're ill. One of the things that we're trying to work with the business community is to change that culture to a culture where if you're sick, you stay home.
In the end, basic planning, preparation, and common sense could be the difference between life and death for millions during a pandemic.
Because a pandemic has such far-reaching implications, it's important that we each be prepared to handle a wide variety of situations. Do you have everything you need right now, assuming all grocery and convenience stores could be closed? Think of this as a hurricane situation, but on a global scale. A key to pandemic preparation is a very well thought out emergency kit that will provide the resources to handle many of the challenges that we'll be faced with. Here are the basics that everyone should have in their home.